in southern Ukraine.
You found your son here?
Ulevich found his son, Sasha, lying on his belly with his head turned to one side. There was nothing left in his head, he told us. Shrapnel killed him. It took only a second.
This war is hard.
Hard. He shakes his head, his eyes moist. I wish it had taken me, not my kid. Ulevich showed us where the shells hit, the smashed roof in a shed, the shrapnel holes in a stone wall, and the impact mark in the stone courtyard just steps from that garage. When the explosion started, his wife Olha had gathered up the other kids and had run inside the house. I was holding my kids with my hands up against the walls. Everyone was very scared, she said. And I thought, I can't see Sasha. I'm so sorry. Sasha was to start grade 3 this month, a middle child of their 5 children. They lived a simple life, but in dangerous territory, just over a dozen kilometers from a shifting front line.
Do you want to get away from here?
Yes, I'm very scared.
What do you think about the people who did this to your son?
Bad. I don't know what I would do to them. They're animals. He led us on his bicycle a short distance to the cemetery. They buried Sasha here 2 days after the strike. Soldiers helped dig the grave. Sasha is one of more than 1,000 children now who've been injured or killed in this war so far. Ulevich wiped his eyes, staring out at the countryside, hearing a thud off in the distance. The shelling hadn't stopped. He vowed to take his family out of here before he lost them all. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Vysunsk, Ukraine.
As we leave tonight, something to lift your spirits and put you in a harmonious mood.
This is feeling like we're back, baby.
Margot Riskin is back, and so is her choir in PEI. Like so many musical groups across the country, silenced and separated by the pandemic. Riskin is a member of the Cornwall Community Choir. The group has many older members vulnerable to COVID. They've been unable to get together for more than 2 years, not online, not even wearing masks. So this reunion is extra special. Another choir member, Joanne Gass, says singing again, side by side, is an emotional experience.
When you see how much the seniors love it and how much they respond to it, it's a real good feeling. It just feels right. It just feels right. Everybody needs something to go to, and everybody needs something to live for, so it's time.
And that's our time for tonight. This has been The World at 6 for Friday, September 16th. I'm Tom Harrington. Thanks for listening tonight. As It Happens is up next. Stay safe and take care of each other. From CBC Toronto, 20 degrees, partly cloudy skies in the city right now. Good evening, I'm Trevor Dunn with a local news update. York Regional Police say they've arrested and charged 6 people after investigating a series of reported thefts from commercial hardware stores. Police say 4 suspects were identified and arrested on Tuesday while they attempted to steal nearly $6,000 in smoke detectors from a store in Barrie. They say 2 more suspects were arrested in Toronto on Wednesday, and a large number of stolen items were recovered. Police have been connected to 21 incidents, and investigators have laid 47 charges against them. That's a local news update from CBC Toronto. For news anytime, you can check our website, cbc.ca/Toronto.
The Environment Canada weather forecast for Waterloo Region and Wellington County. Mix of sun and clouds today with a high 27, the UV index 7. Partly cloudy tonight, fog patches developing near midnight, the low 11. A mix of sun and clouds tomorrow with a high 28, the humidex 34, the UV index 7 or high. Sunday, cloudy with a 60% chance of showers, the high 24. Cloudy with a chance of showers on Monday, the high 23.
We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
The state funeral of Her Majesty the Queen. Join CBC for full coverage from Westminster Abbey, Monday, beginning at 5 a.m. Eastern on CBC TV and CBC News Network, 5:30 a.m. Eastern on CBC Radio, and on cbcnews.ca, CBC Gem, and the CBC News and Listen apps.
Hello, I'm Neil Kirksal.
Good evening, I'm Chris Howden. This is As It Happens. Tonight.
They're paying his gain. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis ships dozens of undocumented immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, and a local lawmaker welcomes the people but decries the politics.
Lost in Translation, the first ever English version of a Uyghur language novel, is now out and getting good reviews, but the author and one of its translators are nowhere to be found.
He does not care for how she was cared for. It took hours for a Quebec man's elderly mother to be treated during a recent visit to the emergency room, and he refuses to accept that this is just the new normal.
In the lineup, a reporter chats with soccer great David Beckham in the midst of the 12 hours he spent queuing up to pay his respects to the Queen.
A Ferris tale ending. A journalist gets up at the crack of dawn to see if she can see all of the sights in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Part of her story is kind of inside baseball.
And new kid on the block. A goat that spent the summer gallivanting around northern Ontario, driven by wanderlust and lust, is in his new home. And don't tell him that his new keeper says the new guy's getting neutered. As it happens, the Friday edition, radio that gathers the situation requires quick fix. Wednesday, around 3 in the afternoon, officials in Martha's Vineyard started getting calls they hadn't expected about some arrivals they hadn't expected. That day, Florida's Republican Governor, Ron DeSantis, ordered 2 planes to be loaded with undocumented immigrants, who were then flown to the Vineyard, an island off the coast of Cape Cod in Massachusetts that's known as a summer getaway for the super rich. Since then, people there have scrambled to find housing and food for the 50 new arrivals, which included children. Today, the state announced that the migrants are being moved again, voluntarily this time, to housing on a military base on the mainland. Dylan Fernandez is a Massachusetts state representative who's been helping out. We reached him in Falmouth, Massachusetts.
Representative Fernandez, can you give us a sense of how these folks are doing now?
So we've moved people from Martha's Vineyard to a much larger facility on Cape Cod. This is the place that has wraparound services. This is the place that has different rooms for the families and much larger facilities than what they had.
How many children are there in the room?
There are 4 young children and maybe a couple other people in their later teens.
How are they all feeling? They've been through a really long journey.
Well, other people in their later teens.
How are they all feeling? They've been through a really long journey.
Well, I think it's been a roller coaster of emotions for a lot of the families here. Several people, I'm told, walked for several months before even making it into the country. Many of them were fleeing violence by gangs, fleeing economic disaster. Many of them had been robbed on their journey here.
They were leaving Venezuela.
I think that it's predominantly Venezuela. I've heard that there's a couple people, but predominantly Venezuela, yes. And then they got to the U.S. after this incredibly arduous journey and were, rounded up by Governor DeSantis and his cronies, lied to by them, packed onto a plane, lied to about where they were going and what was going to receive them when they got here.
Let's go back to Wednesday when this all was unfolding. You say people were lied to. That's the sense we've we've got from watching the coverage to this point and the videos from Martha's Vineyard, what translators were telling people there. What were they told before they got on those planes in Florida?
They're spun of a series of lies. Some people were told they were going to New York, others were told they were going to other cities in the country. People were told that they were headed towards an immigration meeting, and this would facilitate their claim. Other people, almost everyone I think, was told that they would be immediately met with housing and jobs, and that people would be here to greet them. These are all lies, and it all speaks to just how incredibly cruel the governor of Florida is, and the people and Republicans helping him.
Why do you think Ron DeSantis decided to do this?
Well, Ron DeSantis did this as a political stunt. You have the governor of one of the largest states in the United States spending his time not helping his constituents. And look, there's a lot of needs in the state of Florida. And instead spending his time and millions of taxpayer dollars, state taxpayer dollars, hatching a secretive plot to ship families, children, men, women, to our state without any heads-up notice, just so he could go on Tucker Carlson and Fox News and announce it and beat his chest about being tough on immigration. Ron DeSantis is a coward. There's nothing tough about using women and children as political pawns. He's a profoundly weak human being, but what is strong is the community response here and the state of Massachusetts response here to treat these people with the dignity and respect that everyone deserves.
And when you talk about the community response, people in Martha's Vineyard certainly did respond and jumped into action pretty quickly to help house and feed this group of folks, as you said, who had already been through such a harrowing journey. I think people may have an idea of what Martha's Vineyard is like. Certainly it has lots of famous residents, summer residents. But I wonder, though, if sending them away from Martha's Vineyard kind of reinforces that stereotype that people have, that it is a place for wealthy elites, and, you know, why couldn't they stay there?
Well, they couldn't stay there because it's a tiny island, and there's just not the resources to house everyone in one location. And look, they didn't have to leave either. You know, we're not forcing people anywhere. This is entirely voluntary, and it's people's choice if they want to go to a place with a facility on Cape Cod, which has the exact same stereotypes, you know, Cape Cod, that you raised, and they're getting wraparound services there. But these stereotypes are just not factually accurate, and unfortunately, you know, our local people here know that, but unfortunately, national news doesn't, and it has this kind of Tony connotation to it. You know, the median salary on Martha's Vineyard is below the state average.
Florida and other southern states are clearly trying to make a point that they are not getting the support they feel they need to deal with migrants at their border, and say that your state doesn't have to deal with that problem to the same extent. So putting aside how this all unfolded and how difficult and how these people were lied to, the political stunt, as you say, is there something to that argument? Do they need more support?
And look, there's no question that we have a failed immigration system in the United States. But look, I think almost every American knows that we have a broken immigration system. You know, my focus as a state official is just making sure that everyone in my community and in my state is getting the resources and the things that they need.
Do you think the response that we've seen to what has happened to this group, do you think it could backfire on DeSantis?
You know, I don't really care that much about the politics of this. I mean, it's more important to me to just make sure that these 48 people that got off the plane in my state are cared for, because at the end of the day, these are human beings, and while you might treat them with just a level of cruelty that is just mind-numbing to me, you know, we're going to treat people with compassion. I mean, Ron DeSantis is also familiar with my district because he was here just a month ago on the island of Nantucket at a 50,000 late fundraiser kissing up to lobbyists. So, you know, he claims that there were some, you know, liberal bastion that he never set foot in. but he was here literally, a few weeks ago begging people for money.
Representative Fernandez, we will leave it there. We hope everyone in that group it can get past what has happened so far as they try to rebuild their lives. Thank you for this.
Yeah, people are in good spirits right now. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Dylan Fernandez is a Democratic Massachusetts state representative. We reached him in Falmouth, Massachusetts. Across the country, patients are dealing with abnormally long wait times in emergency rooms. Some hospitals have even been telling people to avoid the ER unless their needs are absolutely urgent. But even patients in urgent situations are struggling to get through. Last week, when his mother was in excruciating pain, Michael Simard called paramedics, who took her to a hospital in Buckingham, Quebec. The 82-year-old then waited for 8 hours to be seen by a doctor while sitting in a chair with an injured back. And now her family is speaking out and demanding change. We reached Michael Simard in Blue Sea Lake, Quebec.
Michael, when did you realize that you were going to need to take your mother to the hospital?
Yeah, so a week ago on Tuesday, I stopped by just for an impromptu visit with my mother, and I noticed that she was actually crying and in quite a bit of pain, and she's having difficulty breathing. So I recommended to my father, who lives with her and takes care of her, that we should call the paramedics, and we did so.
And what did they tell you once they got there?
So from the moment they arrived, it seemed to be a hesitation and almost a discouragement to bring her to the hospital. And I got to say that the paramedics are awesome people. They're great staff. They do amazing work. But they knew what we would be facing once we got there. For example, the Gatineau Hospital, I was told that there would be a 6-hour wait for my mother to wait inside the ambulance on the stretcher before even getting in the hospital. So they decided to bring her to Buckingham at that point.
So you do go to a hospital and you eventually wait 8 hours before your mother is seen by a doctor. Can you describe what that wait was like?
Yeah, actually, it was a little bit of traumatic. I mean, I sent my mother there and I followed in my vehicle. And when I got there, they were, sitting her down on a chair in the waiting room. I could see her sobbing and her eyes were closed and she was in a lot of pain. Finally, they gave her a chair that at least the feet could go up. But when the paramedic was leaving, he passed us in the waiting room and said, I told you this was going to be like almost, normalizing it and saying, well, this is just the way it is. And it was horrific because they evaluated her at a level 5, which is the lowest priority in an emergency. And, they told us that it would be an 8 to 12 hour wait, which turned out to be 8 hours.
When the paramedic said that, what did you say? What did you think?
My first reaction was I'd be better off taking my mother to a veterinarian, that if I had a dog in pain, I could bring them right away, get an x-ray and get treatment within no time, and that we shouldn't be treating any human being this way, let alone elderly people who contributed so much to society and took care of all of us.
She did eventually see a doctor. What did they say? What were you able to learn about why she was in so much pain?
Yeah, so in her upper back, because she has osteoporosis, some of her discs had broken or almost, I'll say, disintegrated, and this was the source of her pain. At that point, she was on a stretcher still in the hallway, but in the emergency ward. Not even an emergency button that you normally get if you need service to, from the nursing station to come and help you. To the point where my mother had to call my brother later on during the night to have him call the hospital to have the nurse go help my mother go to the washroom.
Was she getting pain medication at least?
At that point, she was getting pain medication to at least make her comfortable at that level, but no real plan. I went to see her every day and follow up with the doctors, and it was more, how can we get her home? The best place for her is at home, and I kept on reiterating that we agree, but we need the services in place before we bring her there. that was the theme and the constant message is, you know, you gotta go. We're in an emergency. You're not in immediate danger, so you gotta get out of here.
But the kind of describe, did they think that was low priority once they diagnosed what her issue was? That doesn't sound like lowest priority.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you know, it's a best effort. The staff, you know, I'm sure they do the best they can, and nobody would intentionally have a human being sitting there in that much pain.
I wonder what it was like for you, because it doesn't matter how old you are or how old your parents are, your mom is your mom.
Yeah, and I have a super mom. You know, I'm sure everybody has a super mom, but my mother, you know, raised 10 children, and she took care of us and never put herself first. So it's troubling to see somebody suffer like that. Now, the next day, I guess after they figured out that we were not going to take her home unless we had the care, they transferred her that's when they transferred her to Wakefield because they had an empty bed in that hospital. When my mother was transferred there, it was like we were disturbing them, and that, you know, we really didn't feel welcomed. They didn't have access to her file, and it was unacceptable because they were even withholding her pain medication, saying, you know, that this new doctor had to reevaluate her, and I just couldn't comprehend how from one hospital to another that they wouldn't have at least, I don't know, sent the physical file or something where when she got there that they knew what kind of care she needed and, you know, her history.
You know, use that word unacceptable, and I have to say that was the one flashing in my brain in all capital letters, bright lights, and I bet you many people across the country, whether they've had this experience or not, feel the same way. When you think of your experience and that this is happening in similar ways across the country, what does it say to you about how we treat seniors in this country?
These are human beings with a whole life behind them, and we're all going to get there. The most troubling part with all of this, and this is, you know, gone on for quite some time, even before the pandemic, is that we seem to normalize it. And I'm sorry, this is not normal, and I won't accept it. My mother deserves better. Your mother deserves better.
The health network in the Wutwe region responded to your mother's story, saying the ER was abnormally busy during her visit to the hospital, and they say that kind of transfer you talked about to another hospital is not unusual. What do you make of that response?
Well, you know, it's there's pros and cons. I mean, we were fortunate to have my mother admitted in a bed and out of the hallway and have, you know, I guess a little bit better care. I mean, the negative is that it was 65 kilometers away from my father, who I mentioned earlier. He's 92. It's been really hard on him for the past week not to be able to visit my mother every single day and be with her like he has been since they retired. It's interesting because, again, I don't work in a medical field, so I don't want to tell people how to do, you know, their jobs. The people that are there and who are able to manage, I'm going to say, are great and are compassionate. They're willing to do everything possible they can to help, but unfortunately, there's not enough. It's almost like we have to restart from scratch and redefine what our healthcare system is and build it into something that's better. You know, we have a big family. We will pick up the slack where my mother's care will lack, but there's still people in the hospital right now in Buckingham in that hallway with no one to speak for them. And I care about those people as well. And I'm hoping this helps them get some level of dignity.
Well, Michael, please pass on our best wishes to your mom. Tell her that we're thinking about her and your dad. We really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share the story, and thank you as well for your time.
We reached Michael Simard in Blue Sea Lake, Quebec. When you're one of the world's most recognizable athletes, you don't wait in line. For example, if David Beckham shows up at a fully booked restaurant, he is not told, "We'll see what we can do." He is seated immediately. If he wants tickets to a sold-out West End show, he gets front row seats and no one complains. So people were surprised to hear that around 2 in the morning, the soccer superstar joined thousands of others waiting to see the Queen lying in state. And while he was in that line, Mr. Beckham spoke with the BBC, and a fellow queuer beside him joined in.
We all want to be here together. We all want to experience something where we celebrate the amazing life of our Queen. And I think, you know, something like this today is meant to be shared together. So, you know, the fact that we've been here, we're eating Pringles, we're eating sherbet lemons, you know, we're eating sandwiches, having coffee, so donuts as well.
You didn't think that you'd be in the queue with David Beckham, did you?
No, I didn't, but big respect to him. He's stood with us and he's paid he wants to, and I think that's amazing, and it's just been really good.
And how long have you been in the queue, David?
I think we all got here, 12 hours.
Right, okay. And how's it been on the knees? Because we've seen you...
The knees are okay to the back.
Right.
And the feet.
That was David Beckham speaking from the line to see the Queen lying in state. Fry and his best friend, Ferris Bueller, heckling players at a Chicago Cubs game at Wrigley Field. Just one of the many spots around the city of Chicago they get to, along with Ferris's girlfriend Sloane, in the 1986 film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The classic tale of a wily teenager and his pals playing hooky and exploring all the city of Chicago has to offer over the course of one action-packed day. Well, last weekend, freelance journalist and Washington Post contributor Lee John Greco set out to pack in all that action herself, enlisting a couple of friends in a possibly quixotic attempt to recreate everything Ferris did on his famous day off. We reached her, of course, in Chicago.
How does it feel to have spent a day walking in Ferris Bueller's shoes?
It was amazing, and yeah, I did walk in his shoes and his vest too. My friends and I all dressed up like the characters, and it was just such a joyful day in Chicago. I think it was one of the best days of my life, honestly.
Wow, it is a beautiful city and lots to explore. So you dressed up as Ferris, your friends were Cameron and Sloane. A lot of the charm, there's a lot that's charming about this film, but a lot of the charm is how carefree it all seems, right? Blowing away the list of things you have to do, you know, what you have to do, go to school, all of that. But it takes a lot of planning, I would imagine, to actually pull this off.
Yeah, so it's funny. I think if you want to recreate a Ferris Bueller day, you kind of have to think more like a Cameron. So you have to keep a really tight timeline. I spent a few weeks putting this together, running it by my editor, figuring out if I could find a parade the same day as a Cubs home game. And then, of course, I looked up all the locations in Google Maps and tried to figure out how long it would take me to get to each destination. So I really planned it out down to the minute, pretty much. And I do have to admit, I was looking at my phone from time to time to make sure that we were on time, getting everywhere. But I still think I managed to appreciate the day and take time to stop and look around for a minute.
This was inspired by the same thing that so many people, I'm sure, who watched this movie over and over again have thought, and that is, could you fit this all into one day, let alone, you know, in the hours of just a school day? So did you manage to do it? Did you manage to check off all of the things?
So I think yes and no. So yes, but with a few caveats. So there were some things we couldn't do because they either don't exist in real life or they were sets or something like that. So, for example, the Chicago Stock Exchange, that specific floor that he visits doesn't exist anymore, so we had to skip that. I did tweak the timeline a little bit. So Ferris hits up the Cubs game, then the parade, and then the Art Institute. And so I changed that around a little bit because it didn't make sense to go from downtown back to the Cubs Stadium, which is nowhere near downtown, I think. So I kind of put everything in one spot so that we weren't driving back and forth. But we did get to Cameron's house, which is real, at 5:55. So I don't think Ferris would have had time to run back home and get there by 6 and be in bed. So it's possible to do 90% of it, I think.
Any cars through the windows, though?
No, that was probably the other thing. I really wish I would have rented, not stolen, because I can't tell people that they should steal a car, but I do wish I would have, I guess, commandeered a convertible for the day. Unfortunately, we're just driving my Mazda, and unfortunately, nobody really wants to steal it, so it was fine. Came home without a scratch on it.
When you went to the restaurant, did you lie to get a table?
No, we got there and they immediately recognized us. That was kind of one of the funny things about the day is people really treated you like you were the character, except in the instance of the restaurant in which they really liked us. They were not snooty. But, you know, Chicagoans and visitors in Chicago were really excited to see us. We ran into a bachelorette party at Wrigley Field who just went wild when they saw us. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, the restaurant was a very nice, not snooty experience.
I can see why you say this is, you know, one of the best days of your life, just by hearing you tell me about it. In terms of the parade, did you jump on a float and dance to Twist and Shout?
I did, yes. We just walked up in our costumes, and again, they recognized us, and I asked, hey, we're doing this story. I'd love to jump on your float if I can. And they said, yeah, we were actually looking for somebody to play Ferris. So it actually worked out great. And yeah, they had people in dirndls and the dachshunds. It was super German. It was awesome. And they did play Twist and Shout twice. So that was great.
Just for good measure. I've had some pretty great assignments, but this might be hard to top. What do you make of the fact that the reaction that you got from people, like you say, they recognized you, how you and your friends felt doing this? What do you think that says about the film's popularity? I can't believe almost 40 years since it came out.
Yeah, it's wild it's been that long. And wild that we met people in Chicago who told us they were extras in the movie. One of the folks in the parade said that they were in that parade scene. So it's really a part of Chicago history, and John Hughes really wrote this as his love letter to Chicago. He said he wanted to not only feature the art and the architecture, but the spirit of the city. So when people saw us, it's kind of the way that you react to the film. You watch Ferris Bueller and you want to live vicariously through him. So I think people wanted to live vicariously through us, and they see Ferris Bueller as a celebration of Chicago.
How do you top this, though? Are you planning to recreate any other movie experiences, or this is it?
I don't know how to top it. I was kind of thinking of what other movies take place in Chicago. I already wrote a story last year about people visiting the Home Alone house. But as far as other Chicago movies, I don't know. Maybe While You Were Sleeping, if I can marry a young Bill Pullman, you know, for work purposes, I'll do that. But I just rewatched The Dark Knight the other day. Not a lot you can reenact there legally. So this might be it. This might be the peak.
Well, Lee, thank you for taking us on the trip with you. I may need to plan another trip to Chicago now. Thanks so much, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
Lee Giancarreco is a freelance journalist and contributor to the Washington Post, and we reached her in Chicago.
We're going to take a short break now. There is much more to come for you on this Friday edition of As It Happens.
Out to pasture at long last. We'll get the latest on Goaty the goat, whose travels have captivated a nation, even as he refused to be held captive.
And card-carrying members of the Card Carriers Club. Chris and I have our hands full today with so many postcards. You've sent
so many postcards.
Your stamps of approval. Stay tuned. I'm Neil Köksal.
And I'm Chris Howland.